Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody to Inside the Avatar Studio. My name is Kevin Feenan, or in Second Life, I'm also known as Phelan Coramel. I'm the founder of Rockcliffe University Consortium, and with us today we have Fleep. And Fleep, I apologize, I always get your last name wrong, and I just realized I should probably have double-checked it. Fleep Tuque?
Fleep Tuque.
Tuque, like a Canadian. Excellent, I love it.
Yes, exactly.
And Fleep is with the, actually both Fleep and Andrew are both with the University of Cincinnati. And we have Andrew Hughes with us as well, who not only is a professor with the University of Cincinnati, but also is the CEO of Designing Digitally. So I'd like to welcome you both to Inside the Avatar Studio.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So what I was hoping that we could talk about was essentially the state of education as it's existing with inside virtual worlds today, and some of the interesting things that have really sort of been happening out of late. Certainly there has been a lot of movement that has been happening, and I mean, first of all, with the announcement at the SLCC of the closing down of the Teen Grid on Second Life, and then subsequently with regards to Linden Labs' pricing policy that just came out a little while ago. A lot of what's happening with that, I think, has really been forcing educators to rethink the way they're approaching virtual worlds. And I guess where I really want to start off with, being as both of you are sort of front and center inside the education field, where have you sort of been seeing a lot of the movement sort of been going, and some of the conversations that have been happening over the last several weeks specifically?
Well, I guess, I think that the changes from both Linden Lab and I would say it's twofold. It's Linden Lab as well as the rapid development of OpenSim as a promising platform that has gained a lot of stability in the last year. In addition to real-world economic pressures. And I think the conversations that I'm hearing, I just had a meeting today with a group of, there are some 20-some institutions on the list, and I think everyone is, nobody wants to full sail move out of Second Life because we've invested much in the platform. So those who can afford to stay here, I think, plan to, even if they may be forced to reduce some of their campus size. So many people are talking about, cutting their virtual campuses in half. But in addition to staying in Second Life, I think that I don't know of any institutions that aren't talking about exploring OpenSim, and that's a big difference. Just this summer at the Second Life Community Convention, when Philip came and he talked about education and he announced the Teen Grid closing, there was a little bit of rumbling about OpenSim, but just a few months ago this was not on everybody's radar as a must-do thing this year, and I think that has changed because of the pricing announcement and some of the other moves that Linden Lab has made. I don't know of a single institution at this point that isn't at least talking about OpenSim and in a let's start working on this now, not next year kind of way.
Right, and I can solidify what she's stating. We've had many clients still keep some of the sims that they've had. They are dropping about 50% of their sims and just trying to take up less space and do the same amount of workload inside of this virtual environment as possible. But we have many of them requesting to have content migration to OpenSim and to have a private sim that is then hypergrided to, let's say, OS Grid or Reaction Grid, so on and so forth. So you're very correct, Fleep.
Yeah, and I just, I think I also read this morning, we were talking about it this morning, that I think John Lester, Pathfinder Linden, was just hired by Reaction Grid, I think, to do some education outreach for them. So I think in terms of where are people moving, the grids that I'm hearing most frequently mentioned, those who are sort of standing up their own test grid to just play around are connecting to Open OS Grid because it's easy to sort of connect to them openly. But if they're moving or looking for a hosted solution, they're moving to Reaction Grid and Jocadia's Grid, actually, if you know Joe K from Australia.
Yeah, I mean I know it's one of the we're doing it pretty much exactly the same thing here at Rockcliffe. I mean we're planning on making a move to one or more. I mean we're not necessarily looking at necessarily going to just one OpenSim environment. We may open up sort of like a satellite campus in different areas, but I mean we're sort of in a different boat. We're sort of dependent a lot on the social network sort of being there, and as you said, I mean the social network right now is sort of being spread to the four corners of the metaverse. So for us, it's a fairly important thing to know where the social connections, the social organizations going. But for other groups, I mean, when you're talking from the University of Cincinnati standpoint, and we were fortunate that we got to hear a little bit from the people at Purdue a couple of days ago at our open house. But I mean, from the University of Cincinnati standpoint, what are the advantages that they're seeing in terms of going to an OpenSim environment? As you said, I mean, this is very, very quick in terms of how people are looking at this. And I guess one of the things that I'm wondering about is when you're dealing with a closed social network, which tends to happen in a university setting. I mean, you're essentially bringing a social network with you, right? You're not sort of going there because there's a social network already there. From a strategic standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, what are you guys thinking about in terms of the type of benefits that you're looking at from an OpenSim environment?
Well, I think there are a couple of different things that we're considering. First of all, I think the content, the ability to develop content that we know will be portable to other places is very important, because one of the things we've realized, of course, as have many of us, right, we've all invested thousands and thousands of man-hours in developing the spaces and builds and learning objects and avatars and all of the content that we've spent years creating in this grid, in Second Life, that now we, at this point can't take out. And while I know there have been lots of criticisms about educators taking advantage of free content, of course we use free content and purchase content, but we've also developed our own things as well. And our island is a mishmash of things that we've created as well as things that others have created. And one of the issues that we're one of the benefits of using OpenSim is if we develop our content in our own grid, then of course we will be able to export that content wherever we want. So that's one thing. And of course the other big issue is cost. Certainly after yesterday's election, in Ohio anyway, there was a Republican landslide, and the reports are that this is going to result in really severe budget cuts for education. So coupled with Linden Lab's pricing policy change and what looks like a tightening political climate in the real world, we simply have to justify literally every penny we're spending. And when we have a 4SIM campus in Second Life right now, and we will, of course, lock in the reduced rate that Linden Lab offered. So we'll be able to pay in advance for a couple of sims, but we're definitely going to reduce our land holdings here because we had one sim that was basically a development space for us to practice, for our faculty to play around. It's not really something that visitors necessarily need access to or need to use anyway. And so it doesn't make any sense to pay Linden Lab for a space that we're basically using as a sandbox when we could do that for free. You know what I mean?
Yep. Andrew, are you finding the same thing with how you're using SL at the moment, or?
Yes, absolutely. We still have a large demand for behind the firewall solutions, especially many of our corporate clients. And doing cost analysis and them already having ventured interest inside of Second Life, OpenSim has been their number one choice after providing the research and analysis. We have been looking at other engines for the browser-based virtual worlds that we've had a large demand for, at least in our client list. But I can tell you, there's just like Fleep stated, they are not leaving Second Life as of yet. I think just like Fleep stated again, the fact that the prices went up so high, and the fact that the people that were laid off by Linden Lab are now joining the effort inside of OpenSim speaks a lot for what the OpenSim community can provide to many of us that have been very dedicated to Second Life for so long.
Yeah, I would think though that there'd be a huge issue, because I mean there was a issue that came up a few years ago where one company, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I mean one company essentially set up an OpenSim environment. They attracted a whole pile of people to the environment. They then turned around and said, we don't like this group of people over here, so they essentially threw them out and kept all the content. Right. I mean, these OpenSim environments are, in some cases they're being run by one or two people that don't necessarily have the breadth of business experience that some public education or any type of public organization may be looking for in terms of management expertise and the ability to manage a sustainable ongoing enterprise.
Kevin, this is my thought process on that. If you look at the way that web hosting is done, you can look down the street and look in your local neighborhood and find someone who's probably hosting a few websites. But then there's large companies such as GoDaddy, 1&1. We all know of the large web hosting companies, and basically the way that OpenSim has presented itself is it can be hosted by a plethora of people, and they could all be small companies or very large companies. It really comes down to your preference and what you're going to feel most comfortable as a consumer in investing your data and your hosting with.
Yeah, and I think that universities in particular are going to have choices, and it's going to come down to where your institution is in the exploration of virtual worlds as an educational platform. I think that those who are sort of latecomers to the game may still opt with Second Life because Linden Lab is an established company. It's got the largest user base. It has the largest content repository. I think at this point, the folks that I've been talking with, you're faced with the problem, right? Do you have the technical ability? Do you have the staff? Do you have the infrastructure and funding? And obviously all campuses have servers and internet connections and broadband and that sort of thing, at least in the U.S. Surprisingly, actually, some of the international schools, broadband is still an issue for them. So hosting their own sims or connecting to a larger grid if they're running the sims themselves can be a problem. But I think most U.S. institutions, bandwidth isn't the issue. It's the staff problem. Can you justify to your dean or to your department head that it's worth paying a system administrator to run the system for you? And I think some schools, don't have those resources available. And so, I think the big question, at least one of the things that I'm concerned about, is the education community in Second Life started early, and we had a number of communication tools, not just in-world groups that we've all joined, but the sled list and other tools outside of Second Life that kept us sort of in a cohesive group so that we were able to communicate and share with one another our resources, our builds, and that made Second Life very attractive. One of the things that I'm worried about is someone in the local chat mentioned diaspora, and I think that that's a really apt word. I'm somewhat concerned that if everyone sort of flies off to the four corners of the metaverse and everyone's working on their own grid and their own content and doing their own thing, and we lose some of that cohesiveness, I worry that there will be a lot of recreating of the wheel and a lot of wasted time, resources, and money, as well as losing the opportunity, even with hypergrid. I think that some people are mistakenly thinking OpenSim is a magic bullet that's going to replace Second Life lock, stock, and barrel, and at least my experience is that is not the case. While OpenSim has certainly really developed in leaps and bounds in the last year, it's still not as stable, and if you go with a hosted solution, you don't know necessarily who the grid operator is, and I think that there are still technical challenges. For example, they just upgraded OpenSim to the 0.7 version, and the Hypergrid 1.5 isn't compatible with the previous version, so it won't be as easy, for example, for me to take my students on a virtual field trip. I'll have to check and see if the place that I'm going is, compatible with my version of OpenSim and my version of Hypergrid, and that's not even, bringing up the issue of the viewers, which, of course, there are many different viewers out there as well. So I think we're in a really interesting point in time. I don't know that there's any consensus yet on where exactly everyone is going, what exactly the OpenSim distribution they're using, or even what viewer we'll all be interacting with. I think it's still kind of an open question right now.
Well, it